Good morning, I'm Rowena Crosby.
And I'm Deborah Renner, and we're your co-hosts for this show. Thank you for joining us for the next 17 minutes for your Invisible Toolbox. We're going to take a look at the tools that are essential for working effectively with others.
And we welcome our returning viewers and also are delighted to welcome some new viewers today. You can see we're in a different set today. We're in my farm in central Iowa, actually in the vegetable garden, and we're enjoying that time of year where some of the plants have already finished their harvest of fruits and vegetables and others are continuing to harvest. We're going to use this as an analogy in terms of if you can harvest from a garden, what does it mean to harvest from your network?
Yes, and Ro is just harvesting some blackberries for us. Things are abundant out here.
Things are abundant.
So we are going to take a look at this productive garden and what can it tell us about our own network. For those of you following along in the book, Your Invisible Toolbox, we are taking a look at Chapter 19, Tend to Your Net.
And our tool today is going to allow us to maximize the productivity by tending to our relationships.
And as always, we're going to give you some insightful resources around our invisible tool, as well as a great development challenge.
Now, it's estimated that each of us has a network of 250 people, our sphere of influence. That's the number of people we know on a first-name basis, or the number of people who would probably attend your wedding or your funeral.
Well, and in support of this theory, if given a little time, you could probably write down the names of 250 people that you knew on a first-name basis. And people that are experts at teaching people to network might tell you that you can leverage that network when you need it. And they'll teach you how to gain access to the network and to the people those people are connected to, and exponentially increase the size of your network.
So let's say you can list the names of 50 people. And if each of those 50 people can name 50 more people, you can see those numbers add up fairly quickly, don't they?
Yes. So networking should be fairly simple. You just simply contact the people that you know, you tell them what you need, and voila, you have everything you need right there.
But as all of us know, it doesn't work that easily. Simply because you can list the names of 50 people or 250 people does not mean that you can count on them to help you to achieve your goals.
No, and ask yourself this question. Who is the person that you would get out of the bed for at 2 a.m. to help? And it's not a person in your immediate family that you may feel an obligation to, but just someone in your network that you would get out of bed cheerfully to help them. If you can think of that person, who that individual is, they have a strong network tie to you.
And so the key of networking is to figure out how can we be that person to others. And that's what we're going to look at today.
So it's time to take a look at our invisible tool of the week. And the tool is tend to your relationships.
So it's not enough to merely want a healthy and abundant network. It's what are you willing to give in exchange for it. Nature, and here we are sitting in beautiful nature, tends to frown on the idea of something for nothing. I think it's a basic law of physics that for every action there's an equal and opposite reaction.
That's exactly it. So consider the example of a gardener. A good gardener tills and seeds the garden. They're going to water the garden. They're going to weed the garden. And through all those actions, they're actually going to have a bountiful harvest.
And so if you think about somebody coming out with just some packets of seeds and throwing the packets on the ground or just tossing the seeds around, they're going to get a bountiful crop of weeds. And you can repeat this experiment over and over again, and you're going to see the same results. If you just toss the seeds on the ground, you're going to get weeds. If you care for it, you can get a good crop.
So the gardener can busy themselves with a lot of activities, but it's only the careful selection of sun-drenched soil and activities related to sowing and weeding and watering that are going to create that bountiful crop. So sowing your seeds, though, on the interstate, which is a little right across the road.
Yeah, we're actually not very far from it.
Isn't going to give you a bountiful crop. You have to be able to have good selection.
Exactly. And so it is with networking. So we can busy ourselves with all kinds of goals, but unless we do the essential tasks and tend to it over time, and the harvest is not immediate, it tends to have to wait, and we have to do the work in between.
That's so true. So what are we willing to give in exchange for the achievement of our goals in networking? Are the actions that we're actually partaking in going to really reinforce that network and keep that network alive?
And it's useful for us to remember that at the center of the word networking is found the word work. And there's a lot of different theories on what kind of work is involved in it, and that's what we're going to explore today. What are some of the myths around it?
Right, people can think it's just instant. I know the people, therefore I have a network. We have to tend to those relationships. And like the gardener, the benefits are greatly increased if we do tend to it. You know, when a gardener puts one seed in the ground, it's not one plant that they get. That one seed might produce 100 plants.
Exactly, and we really see that as we're sitting here in the vegetable garden, and right behind us you see the tomato crop with the sweet corn behind, and each one of those tomato plants is going to produce a large number of wonderful, now are they fruits or vegetables? I think there's a debate on whether tomatoes are fruits or vegetables. It is. Well, we're now going to move to the segment of the program that we call Mythbuster, and we're going to bust 12 common myths, some of the things you may have been taught about networking. And many people, I think, know that Deborah is an expert in etiquette and protocol. She's certified through the Protocol School of Washington, D.C., and we're going to use her as our expert. I'm going to present to her 12 myths, and she's going to talk us through some best practices on how to grow your network. So this is the segment of the program we call Mythbuster, and in this program we're actually going to bust 12 myths around networking. You may have learned some of these. And we're going to tap Deborah's expertise. Deb, as many of you know, is an expert in etiquette and protocol. She's certified through the Protocol School of Washington, D.C. So I'm going to present each of these myths to Deb, and we're going to have her comment. And we invite you to think a little bit about if you've fallen into the trap of some of these myths. So Deb, our first myth is the one we call business card blizzard. And many of us have been taught when we're at a networking event to make sure you get your card in the hands of as many people as possible. And there's a 3-foot rule that anyone within 3 foot gets your business card. Would you comment on that for us?
This is a myth, and I had someone tell me once, oh, I give my card to everyone I meet in the airport. The card has no value unless you've created some value in terms of the interaction with someone else, and you need that contact information. And so to just give your card out randomly, it's probably going to be put in the nearest garbage can. We want to make sure that we do have significant conversations where someone says, may I have your card? And then it's totally appropriate to give it to them. But to just throw your cards out there, they probably will not be valued. And you know, there are certain meetings where people, for name purposes, international meetings, where people will exchange cards at the beginning of a meeting to kind of be able to place them where people are seated. That's appropriate. There are certain chamber functions where everyone exchanges their card. That's appropriate. But in a normal business setting, we want to create value before we give it.
Especially if we're trying to build our networks.
Exactly.
Yes. Well, our second myth is what we call do your homework networking, and that's to research everyone and everything before you get there so you can dazzle everybody with your knowledge.
Oh, that's a great myth. Let's debunk that one. It is great to be able to brief yourself and know who it is you might be interacting with, who might be coming to an event, but not for the reason of dazzling. We don't dazzle people by making ourselves interesting. We actually dazzle them by being interested in them. And so we want to make sure we have some background information, but for the purpose of just being more comfortable in the setting and knowing what to expect.
Well said. Don't dazzle them by being interesting. So myth number 3 we've called techno networking, and there is so much available to us technologically. And in fact, networking is so uncomfortable for many of us. We think, oh, I can do this with technology, and maybe I won't even have to talk to people.
Yes, and technology is great because we can touch base with people in our network very quickly. We can say, you know, haven't seen you in a while, hope you're doing well. Those kinds of ways to use technology work, but ultimately networking is a social interaction, a social function. And face-to-face time is always going to be more impactful than anything we're going to do remotely.
Yes. Well, myth number 4 we call check that box networking, and that's where we get very disciplined that we're going to go to this many events during this period of time and make sure we do our networking activities. There's risks with that, isn't there?
There are some risks with that. If we're going just for the purpose of checking it off of our list, we're probably not engaging in a way that it's going to bring us back anything. We're not going to have a bountiful harvest from that. It's important to show up to places. It's important to extend the places that you choose to go so that you diversify that and diversify your network, but not with the intent of just checking the box. That's not going to bring you anything back. It's just like the gardener who maybe puts the seed in but doesn't do anything with it.
Exactly, and they don't enjoy the harvest. Myth number 5, we call this refer me please networking, and this is when we identify the people with the good networks, and then when we need something we go out and we ask them to refer us to their networks.
Yes, and asking someone to refer us is kind of going a step down from actually creating a network for ourselves. We don't want to ask people to refer us. Actually, when we know that we've established a good connection, they'll refer us without us having to ask. And that's when you know you've got a good, solid connection, when people are thinking of you and they're thinking who they can connect you to.
Yeah, better to be doing things for others than simply going around asking. Well, in our next one, myth number 6, we call strings attached networking. And that's the concept of never give away something for nothing. So if you are going to do something for someone, make sure you ask for something in exchange for it.
Yes, that one is a myth. We want to make sure that we're totally authentic in terms of being interested in people and caring for the people in our network, and that it's not something that we expect to always have a reciprocity. Reciprocity is important in relationships, but it doesn't have to be immediate every time you are giving something that you're getting something. It might be that you give something with good faith, you tend that network, and then when you need something, that person's there for you.
Now, our 7th myth, I have to be a little careful how I say this, because if you say this phrase too fast, it might sound a little obscene, and we call it shoulding. Shoulding networking. And that's when you go to show your expertise to the networking event, and you tell everyone what they should do based on your knowledge and expertise.
Yes. Nobody likes shoulds. We really don't. We don't like to be told what to do or what someone thinks that we should do, and so you want to avoid shoulds, even in our personal lives, to avoid telling someone what they should do. That's not going to establish the kind of connection that feels good to the other person.
Absolutely. Now, the next myth is based on something we know is a good networking skill, and it's the ability to ask questions. But myth number 8, we talk about this as the interrogator networker, where you constantly are asking questions and you respond to questions with other questions, and there's risks with that.
There are risks with that. Questions are important, especially open-ended ones that you can get someone talking and they're revealing things about themselves. But the purpose of that is that hopefully you're going to hear something you can connect something about you to, because a good relationship requires not just finding out about someone else, but disclosing something appropriate about yourself. And if you can disclose something that's actually connecting you and the other person, so for instance, if you say, how'd you get affiliated with this organization? And you listen to them and you realize that's similar to how you got affiliated, and then you disclose, that's so similar to how I got started here, then you've made the connection, and that's what we're looking for in networking.
Absolutely. Number 9, this myth we call all about me networking, and it's to keep in mind what your goals are at networking and look for every opportunity in every conversation to bring it back to, oh, that reminds me about me. We've all been to networking functions where we've interacted with someone using that technique.
We have, and the conversation shouldn't be something where you're just trying to get your message out, either about what you can do, your organization can do. You want to make sure that you're creating the solid kind of connections, and those are the ones where we get to know each other as people.
Yes.
And we're not just talking all about ourselves or trying to steer the conversation around to some kind of agenda.
Absolutely. Now, number 10 we call snob networking, and we are all pressed for time. We've got goals to meet, and this is when we've been advised to figure out who are the most important people that we need to talk to, and don't waste your time with people who can't further your goals.
That is a myth, and we do want to debunk that. We can usually tell, especially if you briefed yourself before you're going to an event, who some very important people are that might be there, but influencers, people who have great wide networks, they might not be as easy to spot, and we really want to diversify our network. Yes, it's important to get to know as many people as you can, but not just of a certain rank or status. You want to be able to diversify that network and not just look towards the people that are the notables.
Yeah, and we may never know who those influencers are, so being kind to everyone helps.
Yes.
Myth number 11, we often talk about the good old boy network, and as business female professionals, we know there's a good old girl network too. And that's when we tend to hang out with people that we have a lot in common with and that we relate to and we're more comfortable with. And so we tend to network in that fashion. And there's drawbacks to that.
There are great drawbacks to that because we're not opening ourselves up to anything new. And when we are out networking and we only stay with the same group, actually others are a little hesitant to break into that. And so the opportunity of having someone approach you is going to be minimized. We always say in our etiquette classes, always go around in groups of 3 or more. Don't go around just with your colleague or with your best friend because people are hesitant to break into that kind of a group.
And in fact, you caution people, don't break into a group of 2 because that could be a more intense conversation.
Yes.
Our final myth, myth number 12, we call this the whatever it takes myth. And you know, sometimes getting appointments with people can be very challenging, and sometimes we tend to stretch the truth or talk our way around just to get the appointment and then disclose what our true motives are later.
Oh no.
And we may get the appointment, but there are challenges with that.
Oh, people don't like to be deceived, and that seems that they're being deceived in terms of what's the purpose for getting together. So we always want to tell people if we have a reason that we want to see them or something that we want to discuss, tell them that up front. Don't make that be something that you pull out and hijack the occasion with, because then people can't trust us.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Deb, for sharing your expertise there. And some of the great things we've learned are really to focus more on the other person and less on ourselves. Give it a little bit of time. Sometimes the results will take some time, just like in gardening. Well, we're now going to move into what we call your development challenge, and we've invited Deb to share a rule around networking that really serves everyone in every instance. Would you go ahead and tell us about that, Deb?
We call it the rule of 3. And so before we go networking, we can just go to the event and do the random networking people do, where they just bump into people and maybe they'll have a significant conversation and maybe they won't. But really, our network is our net worth, and we want to get a result with regards to the time that we spend. And so we can do that if we brief ourselves as to who's going to be there, and then challenge ourselves when we enter the networking environment to have 3 people. And it can be 3 key people to us. That doesn't mean it has to be the most important person in the room, as we talked about, but someone that we would like to have a conversation with. And we've got those 3 individuals in our mind when we enter the room. And actually, before we go enjoy the event in terms of the shrimp or the drink, we try to have a conversation with each of those 3. So we can approach one, if it's possible, to break in, have a conversation, then the next one, then the third one. If one of them is busy or other people are wanting to see them, choose someone else. But have 3 significant conversations before you go to the shrimp and before you go to your drink and before you just do the random networking that a lot of people, that's all they ever do. And so that way, when you leave the event, you've got 3 people who are potentials in your network, and you can start to foster those relationships, and you can grow your network exponentially, because the next time you go to an event, you've got 3 more, and the next time 3 more, and so 3, 6, 9. You start to grow that network in a very authentic way.
Absolutely. And there's some real ties to our gardening examples here, that it isn't just tending to things while they're in progress, but making the plan ahead of time, and just randomly working in the garden doesn't deliver as many results as having a plan and deciding what you're going to do with it.
So many times we want the end result and we don't realize you don't get the end result unless you're able to put the time in, and it's so true with our network.
Yes. Well, we're going to change our location now when we go into our social media posts. We've shared with you a little of the vegetable garden. We're sitting in front of this beautiful wildflower garden with all these coneflowers in full bloom, and we're going to change location as we conclude the show. Well, welcome. It's time for our social media posts of the week, and we've moved location here on the farm. Now you get to enjoy the horses and Spike the mule. We've got Max, Prince, and Junior with us, as well as Spike off to the side, and it's time for our social media posts of the week. Those of you that follow us on social media know that we post several times a day topics that are relevant to interpersonal skills. We're going to feature 2 of them right now. The first is actually to a Tero workshop. It's a 5-hour class on networking, etiquette, and dining, conducting business over a meal. It's called Outclass Your Competition. It's offered in Des Moines in October, and we encourage you to check it out if this is a topic of greater interest to you.
And our second post is a link to some Tero tips videos, and they are all about networking. So you're going to get a link to several videos. These are fantastic.
They are, and short.
Short, a very brief way to take in a lot of networking tools, and that'll be posted on all social media platforms on Thursday.
So thank you for joining us out on the farm today. Tune in again next Monday morning at 9:03 where we'll explore another of our invisible tools of the week.
And now it's your turn. We do welcome your suggestions and ideas for future shows. You can email your ideas to ideas@yourinvisiblettoolbox.com. And we also invite you to get out on your favorite social media platform and find us there, as well as on Instagram. And if you haven't subscribed to Tero's YouTube channel, please do. That way you'll be alerted to when future shows air. And a great thank you to Kyle Plummer, our cameraman and director, off-site today.
And thanks to all of you for joining us. And that's a wrap.